Forbes just released their 2026 list of the most powerful women in sports, and the conversation it started is not going away. Number 4 on that list. Number 4 out of every woman operating in professional sports right now. And not just number 4 overall, but the single highest ranked athlete on the entire list, sitting above tennis legends, Olympic champions, and every player who has spent a decade building name recognition in their sport. That athlete is Caitlin Clark. 1 year as a professional, 1 season to go from college record holder to the most commercially dominant female athlete in the country. And while the basketball world was still processing what that ranking meant, A'ja Wilson decided to make her feelings known in a way that set social media on fire and turned what should have been a celebration into a full-blown controversy. Why do you think A'ja Wilson is so jealous of Caitlin Clark? Drop your answer in the comments right now, because we are about to break down every single thing that led to this moment. Let's start with the money, because the money is where this whole story begins. The average WNBA rookie walks away from their first professional season with somewhere around $60,000. That is the baseline. That is what the league structure produces for most players entering professional basketball at the highest level of the women's game. Caitlin Clark walked away from her first year with $8.1 million. Read that again, $8.1 million. Not a misprint, not a rounding error, not a number that includes future projections. $8.1 million earned in a single year by a player who had never played a professional game before the 2024 season started. The gap between the league average and what Clark produced in year 1 is not a gap, it is a canyon. It is a financial distance so large that it forced every player in the league to reconsider what was possible and what they had been leaving on the table for years. Her WNBA base salary was not the story. The league minimum for rookies sits around $64,000, and Clark's direct salary was not dramatically higher than that. The real story was happening off the court, while other first-year players were calculating grocery budgets and figuring out how to split rent in a new city. Clark was in boardrooms. She was sitting across from executives from the largest sporting goods companies on the planet, and she was negotiating deals that redefined what a female athlete could command from corporate America. The Nike contract set the tone for everything that followed. 8 years, $28 million guaranteed. No WNBA player had ever been in that conversation before. Most veterans with years of league experience and consistent performance had never been offered a fraction of that number from a single endorsement partner. Clark secured generational wealth before her first professional regular season game had even been played. Nike was just the beginning, and the brands that followed understood exactly what they were buying. Gatorade came calling next, and that partnership placed Clark & Company that had previously been reserved for athletes at the absolute peak of global sports recognition. LeBron James, Serena Williams, the same brand association that attached Gatorade's identity to the most iconic performance athletes in the world now included Caitlin Clark. No WNBA player had ever reached that tier of corporate recognition before. Gatorade does not sign athletes as a speculative investment. They invest in people who can move product, shift culture, and reach audiences that extend far beyond the sport they compete in. Wilson Sporting Goods added another layer that made people stop and pay attention. The first athlete they had partnered with at that level since Michael Jordan. Every time someone walks into a sporting goods store and sees Clark's face on a basketball display, that is a check. That is revenue flowing into her accounts from a brand association that connects her directly to the greatest basketball player who ever lived. Speaking engagements became their own revenue stream, and the numbers were jarring for people inside the industry. Clark started commanding appearance fees for corporate events and conferences that exceeded what some WNBA players earned during entire seasons of professional basketball. Companies were not paying for her basketball expertise. They were paying for her ability to fill a room, generate buzz, create a moment that their employees and clients would talk about long after the event ended. She had become someone that corporate America needed at their events, the same way they needed celebrity entertainers and household name keynote speakers. The television numbers made every network executive wish they had moved faster. Games featuring Clark saw viewership increase by 400% compared to typical WNBA broadcasts. Not 4%, not 40%, 400%. Broadcast networks started bidding against each other for rights to air fever games. Advertisers lined up to purchase commercial time during Clark appearances because they knew the eyeballs were there in numbers women's basketball had never produced before. Stadium attendance told the same story in different numbers. Cities hosting Indiana Fever road games saw ticket sales surge beyond anything they had experienced in recent memory. Merchandise sold out everywhere Clark played. Local businesses around arenas reported increased foot traffic and revenue on game nights. Clark was not just playing basketball, she was functioning as an economic engine that generated activity across entire metropolitan areas every single time she suited up. Her social media presence translated directly into marketing value that brands could not find anywhere else. Millions of engaged followers responding to every post created advertising reach that traditional sports marketing campaigns cost tens of millions of dollars to approximate. Companies realized Clark could access demographics that had shown zero interest in women's basketball before she arrived, and those demographics were now buying tickets, streaming games, and purchasing products she was associated with. The Forbes ranking made the financial picture undeniable. Clark's $8.1 million dwarfed the next closest basketball player on the list. Sabrina Ionescu earned $6.3 million, which is an extraordinary number by any standard, but the gap between Ionescu and Clark represents the premium that brands were willing to pay specifically for what Clark brings. That premium is not about basketball skill alone. There are exceptional basketball players throughout the WNBA. The premium reflects Clark's unique combination of performance, personality, and the ability to make people who have never watched a women's basketball game care deeply about the outcome. Forbes did not arrive at her number 4 overall ranking through sentiment. They analyzed earnings, social media reach, endorsement value, and cultural impact through a weighted formula that uses proprietary data and real revenue figures. Every category pointed in the same direction. Clark was operating at a level that had no historical precedent in women's sports. She accomplished in one calendar year what most athletes spend entire careers building toward and never reach. She surpassed tennis legends who have been constructing their personal brands for decades. She placed above Olympic champions who had years of international recognition and podium moments behind them. She did this in her first professional season in a league that most of corporate America had been systematically undervaluing for years. Forbes specifically noted Clark's ability to drive revenue that extends beyond her own earnings. Venues where the Fever played saw economic benefits ripple through the surrounding community. Cities experienced measurable increases in tourism and local business revenue specifically tied to game days. Broadcast deals were restructured because of her presence in the league. She was not just the most powerful woman in sports, she was functioning as a one-person economic catalyst for the entire women's basketball ecosystem. Her crossover into golf drew mainstream media attention from outlets that rarely covered WNBA players at all. Pro-Am tournament appearances attracted sports networks that would never have pointed a camera at a women's basketball player otherwise. That multi-sport recognition is something Wilson has pursued for years without achieving. Nike, Gatorade, and Wilson Sporting Goods each approached Clark differently because they each saw a different audience she could reach. A multi-brand strategy reserved for global superstars operating at the intersection of sports and entertainment. In 2024, she drove 26.5% of the NBA's total economic activity. One player. The math on that number tells you everything about what happened to this league when she walked into it. Now here is where the story gets complicated. Aja Wilson is an exceptional basketball player. She is a multiple-time MVP, one of the best players in the world at her position, and she has built a legitimate brand over years of consistent elite performance. That context matters because what happened next cannot be explained by insecurity alone. Something deeper is happening when a player of Wilson's caliber starts behaving in ways that feel reactive and disproportionate to the success of someone who plays a different position on a different team. This is not random. This is a pattern that has been building since the moment Clark's commercial dominance became impossible to ignore. The Nike deal announcement was where things started shifting. Wilson watched Clark celebrate a historic contract that no WNBA player had ever been offered, and her public response did not look like genuine celebration. Posts began appearing that questioned why rookies were receiving treatment that veterans had been required to earn through years of work and sustained excellence. She never put Clark's name in any of those posts. She did not have to. The timing was obvious to anyone paying attention, and Wilson knew that. The subtle campaign that followed was calculated to look like general commentary on league culture while delivering a specific message to a specific audience about a specific person. Wilson began sharing older photos of herself with Nike executives, content she had not posted in years, suddenly relevant again in a way that only made sense if you understood what she was responding to. The behavior continued and escalated in in ways that became harder to frame as coincidence. Daily posts about veteran accomplishments appeared alongside content about newcomer expectations and the importance of paying dues. Each upload felt timed to Clark coverage dominating the sports news cycle. Wilson's Instagram stories transformed into running commentary on media hype and the difference between attention and actual impact, words that carried weight specifically because of who was currently receiving the most attention in her sport. The shoe situation added a painful dimension to the dynamic. Wilson's Nike signature model was not moving the way she needed it to move. Retail reports showed inventory sitting while anything connected to Clark sold through immediately. Wilson started posting her own shoe from every angle for the first time, tagging Nike repeatedly, sharing throwback content from her shoe launch events. She had never done this consistently before. The timing explained everything. The "I have a shoe to" campaign, as people started calling it online, became the clearest signal of where Wilson's head was at during this period. She was not promoting her product because she suddenly felt inspired to connect with fans about footwear. She was watching her market position get eclipsed by someone a fraction into their career, and she was pushing back the only tools available to her, which were her social media platform and her existing brand relationships. Time Magazine's Athlete of the Year announcement for Clark produced a response from Wilson that people immediately noticed because of how different it was from her normal behavior. One sentence, no personal message, no exclamation point. Compare that to the multi-paragraph celebrations Wilson has historically posted for other athletes receiving major awards and recognition. Her social media history shows warmth and generosity toward fellow players in most contexts. The single sentence for Clark was not oversight, it was a choice. The speaking engagement section revealed Wilson's awareness of her own commercial standing in a way she could not disguise. She had been doing corporate appearances for years without documenting them publicly. After Clark's speaking deal started generating their own news coverage, Wilson began sharing backstage photos from events and referencing appearance opportunities in ways she never had before. The subtext was unmistakable. She was saying, "I do this too." She was performing commercial relevance for an audience that had started defining commercial relevance in women's basketball according to a standard Clark had set and Wilson could not match. Her commentary began using phrases like real impact and sustained excellence in ways that landed differently when every statistical measure of those things was pointing in Clark's direction. The Forbes announcement brought everything to a head. All the months of subtle posts and pointed timing and strategic shoe photos culminated in a public reaction that confirmed what the behavioral pattern had been suggesting. Wilson's response to seeing Clark ranked as the most powerful athlete on the most widely read business publication's sports power list was not congratulations. It was not silence. It was another entry in a running series of public positioning that had been going on since Clark signed her first endorsement deal. Wilson had spent years building what she considered to be a permanent position as the face of modern women's basketball. She had done the work, earned the MVP awards, put in the time, and watched her profile grow into something real and valuable. And then one player arrived, and the entire ecosystem reorganized around that player inside of 12 months. That reorganization is what Wilson cannot accept. It is not Clark's basketball that bothers her. Wilson is confident in her own game, and she should be. What she cannot process is watching the commercial and cultural infrastructure of her sport shift so completely and so quickly that her own position within it is now defined partly by her relationship to Clark rather than standing independently. The difference in their Forbes placements, 4 for Clark and 15 for Wilson, it is not just a ranking gap, it is a representation of how completely the landscape shifted. Wilson went from being a cornerstone of the league's identity to being the player who is having the most public reaction to someone else's success. Here is what the numbers confirm and what no amount of social media positioning can change. Clark's $8.1 million, Forbes number 4 versus Wilson's 15. The 400% viewership lift. These are not opinion, they are measurements produced by corporate decision-making from companies that have no loyalty to any player and every incentive to put their money where the return is greatest. Corporate America looked at both players and made a clear decision. The market does not apologize for its conclusions. The 2026 season is going to keep producing this tension. Clark will keep drawing audiences, closing endorsement deals, appearing on lists, and winning awards. Wilson will keep playing exceptional basketball while watching someone else become the permanent face of a sport she helped build. Whether she finds a way to manage that reality with grace or continues the pattern of pointed social media behavior is a choice she will make in real time and in public. Wilson can post every photo of her signature shoe from every angle on every platform, and it will not change the retail numbers. She can write one-sentence congratulations for for Clark while delivering multi-paragraph celebrations for every other athlete in the league, and the pattern will keep getting noticed. None of it changes the fundamental reality that Caitlin Clark walked into the WNBA and reorganized it around herself in a way that has no real precedent in the modern era of women's sports. The question is whether Wilson finds a way to respond to that reality with behavior that elevates the game, or continues down a path of public positioning that the audience reads clearly and judges